after that, I move on to talking about what's the so-called the environment on the quantum computing looks like, whether if there's any tailwind or headwinds. Then I move on to touch on the management, what's the management ownership, who are the management, whether are they flawed or whether are they genuine into this business and stuff. Then after that, I look into the so-called financials valuations portion. And lastly, I ended off with talking about using option strategies on Arqit. So the reason why I focus a little bit on option strategy because shares is actually relatively simple. Once you understand the business, buy, hold, and that's it. But if not, it's more like strat options. You need to choose the different strike prices and so on. So this is something that you have to think about it. Okay, so moving forward, I will be monitoring the news for Arqit, and of course, if there's anything that pops up here and there, I will be sharing with you guys through my channels. And yeah, this is how I intend it to be. Now, so for today's so-called sharing, I will be talking about Arqit's latest news. Okay, so for those of you who catch this channel for the first time, please watch back my whole Arqit series, the whole playlist, which I have actually, which I will be pasting the link here as well. Watch them through, because if not, if I would just talk about it and if we just jump into it, right, you guys may not understand the whole process. Okay, so based on this news on Arqit, okay, basically, I will be trying to go through my thought process as well when I analyze any news and to share with you guys my thinking process. So when I first look at this news, right, Arqit and Blue Bear collaborate on security autonomous system. So that's the first question I ask myself is that now Arqit requires Blue Bear or Blue Bear requires Arqit? So if you look at the first paragraph, you can say that Blue Bear, basically they are pioneering supplier of unmanned autonomous systems for defense and civil customers. So if by reading the first paragraph, if let's say you tell me Arqit requires Blue Bear system, then this is something a bit strange. Why would a quantum encryption requires in autonomous, or rather unmanned and autonomous system for defense and civil customers? Doesn't make sense to me. But if I were to read further, okay, they told me that this agreement with C2 company jointly demonstrates the implementations of Arqit's quantum encryption capabilities on Blue Bear unmanned system in the critical land, maritime, and aerospace domain. So now this is the part where it interests me because number one, this strategy is what we know as the land and expand kind of concept. So somehow companies need to start somewhere. So for Arqit's case, okay, they need to land customers, try it out, make sure it makes sense, okay, before they can grab bigger and other customers along the way. So this proves to me as a very important steps. I wouldn't say a milestone, but it's more like an important pebble steps for Arqit to get more and more customers on board. Okay, because so this strategy is what we call as the land and expand strategy. Okay, so Blue Bear, okay, they basically have a variety of unmanned vehicles, etc., and so on. So they tapped onto Arqit's quantum cloud technology, or rather quantum encryption, okay, for their range of products. Okay, so basically this allows Blue Bear to tap onto Arqit's technology. Okay, so if I were to look at it, the Blue Bear is an unmanned so-called technology defense. Okay, and this got me thinking to another article which I've talked about previously on quantum encryption. Okay, needs to be global as well as rather limitless. So if they are, so that means to say this security will challenge, or rather will test and prove, okay, that Arqit's technology can reach a certain range, a good range, comfortably for Blue Bear to use. Because if the range is limited, then it doesn't make sense for Blue Bear to tap onto Arqit's technology. So this is something that I'm trying my best. Every time when I read on news, I try my best to link, or rather to connect the dots accordingly based on all the past few things that I have researched upon. Okay, so this is something that you guys should also develop over time. Yeah, and of course, the Blue Bear CEO would say, Arqit's security solutions are always very good and so on. So this is something that I want to highlight to you guys. It's more of an unpopular kind of sharing, is that many of times when we read the news, look at the earnings transcript, I tend to actually pay very little emphasis on what like the CEO says, founder says, and so on. Because let's put it this way: being a founder, being a CEO, would you actually say bad things about your own product? Technically, to be honest, you wouldn't, right? And if you have a collaboration with another company, like for example, Blue Bear and Arqit, would you say Arqit is bad? If let's say you're from Blue Bear, would you say Arqit is bad? If it's bad, why would you have collaborate in the first place, right? So I actually pay very little emphasis on whatever the founders or management talk about themselves, unless they acknowledge some flaws within their own products, or they acknowledge some competitions within their products. So this is something that I will take note, and I will be very, very happy, if you ask me, as a shareholder, if the management acknowledge their flaws. Because yeah, so that's what I look at it. And Arqit's founder, David Williams, he actually openly said that competitions will come in for quantum encryption. So this just tells me, that quantum encryption from Arqit is not, it's not a monopoly thing. They will come in, competition will come in. But what gives Arqit a head start is the number of years of experience that they have garnered and the number of customers that they have locked in. Yep. So this is something that is good. Yep. So these are things that that as investors, when we look at it, right, we don't take surface value as it is. We have to think through, understand it, read in between the lines, and come out with our own investment thesis. So this is my simple investment thesis on this portion here. Okay, now moving on to the second piece of news is that Arqit boosts their top team with senior USAF veteran. So it's David Kumashiro. So he joins Arqit as a general manager for the US. So this piece of news is quite good. It's interesting for me because number one, Arqit is based in UK. So I have no doubt that they would definitely get buy-in the UK's government's support, because look, we have how many GCHQ members inside their board? How many max military staff are on their board? So I have no doubt on the UK's portion, but the US is something where they have to go in to grow. Ultimately, US is still a bigger player, bigger so-called customer base for them to land and grab, or rather land and expand. So having a veteran, US Air Force guy, David, okay, joining them, all right, it does opens up some relationships. Now, this case is that I'm not here to comment whether David has enough relevant experience or not, but it definitely opens up the relationship for Arqit to go into the defense in the US sector. Okay, now this is just my thought process. So now let's look at the credentials of David. So he's an ex-Air Force guy for about 30 years. Okay, generally this doesn't really excite me much, because having experience in the military, okay, and moving into the private sector, okay, I always see that there's always this thing of, are you able to adapt to it? Yes, you have relationship, that you bring in good relationships, or rather you bring in relationships to the business, and that's very important for any business. But in terms of being able to have that mindset to work, not say to work, but the mindset to contribute in a private sector, the dynamics is definitely way different from the military. So this is something that I will have to see how it pans out to be. Okay, so now let's move on. So David was the director for research and analysis at the National Security Commission of AI. Okay, now this part here, all right, to me, I feel that it's quite interesting. I do see a little bit of some linking between what Arqit is all about, because David, he's the director, but he's the head of research, right, in AI. So definitely he will come across some technological advancements to it. So perhaps Arqit moving forward, they can bring in AI into their technology. Perhaps I do not know how this whole thing pans out, but maybe there's something where we can go. Okay. Now, he also led the Department of Defense line of effort focused on application of AI associated with technology. Yeah. So basically, it's all related to AI concept. So yeah, that's basically how I'm looking at it, looking at this piece of news. So yeah, like I mentioned, you see, Arqit has already made impressive progress with the US government customers, and I'm excited about. Okay, so this sentence is that, you know, if this is true, that means to say that the US government has already taken notice of Arqit, and potentially they may make Arqit as one of their vendors as well. So yeah, this is how I analyze my news. So yeah, I hope you have learned something through this whole short little sharing. Okay, now if you enjoy my sharing, please like and subscribe, and do comment below. We can have a chat if there's anything that you guys want me to talk about. And of course, if you found any news that you have regarding Arqit or quantum computing, please just share it in the comment. I'll read through them and I'll give you my thought process after that. All right, so I'll see you in my next video. Invest safe.